welcome to the next installment of the Train Vicar. In recent weeks, I've been doing submissions, for example, to annual plans for local councils and for transport rules for the New Zealand Transport Authority. Well, I've been writing submissions ever really sort of since I came to New Zealand as a teenager. Shortly after I came here, I discovered the whole consultation process in New Zealand. And one of the first submissions that I've submitted on was this one here about the Britomart Transport Centre in Auckland. It was consulted on in 1995 and it was opened in 2003. I think what was delivered in 2003 was significantly better than what was proposed in 1995, which was still very car-centric. If my submissions across the years had been followed, New Zealand would be in quite a different place today. It would have a great national public transport system with railways at its centre. There would be one cohesive public transport network that would enable easy transfer and travel with access to recreation, employment and social opportunities. New Zealand would have far fewer motorways and be less car-centric. And it would be easier for most people to get around and access important centres. Railways would also have been far more competitive in the freight market. Carbon emissions from transport in New Zealand would have drastically reduced, so the current oil shortage would not have affected New Zealand as much, but of course other vested interests had a greater say. I still remember my submission on public transport to the Otago Regional Council in about 1996 and my private conversation with one of the public transport planners. At that stage, I recommended that the buses in Dunedin should run at regular intervals, like every half an hour or so, and provide transfer opportunities, rather than as a tangle of independent lines running at irregular times. Back then, each ride was charged for separately, and there were different operators. Even the operators between daytime and evening services on similar routes were different. I was told that my proposal was not feasible in New Zealand, where a strict market model to public transport was adhered to, which gave the best value for money, apparently. Well, over the years, transport planners in New Zealand realized that this market model provided just a bad service, not value for money. About 20 years after I proposed it, Dunedin finally introduced regular bus timetables provided for transfers and even built a bus hub. And public transport patronage has improved as a result. I continue to advocate for good public transport, and I think the best public transport, of course, is by train. But what if I'm wrong? What if my advocacy for public transport endangers many other things that I value? For example, what if I'm duped by the globalists who want 15-minute cities and social control? What if through public transport the government monitors my every move? What if people find others with varying political or religious ideas dangerous and want to ban them from public transport? Would I then be stuck in my city quarter if I'm different? What if it will become uneconomic for large families to take public transport? Will I then not be able to see my grandchildren if one of my children decides to have a large family? What if I can no longer access the mountains I so love? Well, those are some of the dangers, but most of the fears are not really that realistic. I have lived in what are practically 15-minute cities or towns in Switzerland, and it's brilliant. It's so easy to access the shops and local services, it's easy to catch the bus to the train station, and in one suburb there was a great sense of community as you bumped into the same people at the shops, the playground, the church and the bus. Even now here in New Zealand, I'm living within 15 minutes to most services and close to public transport routes. The only problem is some of the major roads that make it unsafe for children, but otherwise, having everything close is really great. Let me respond to some of the other fears. About control, yes, that is a danger, but that is mostly due to technology and convenience. And it's even more so in the case of cars. After all, cars are far more dangerous than a human traveling on public transport. That's why cars have registration plates, why there are so many traffic cameras and traffic cops. And I think soon there will be electronic distance-based charging for cars. Already through smartphones, companies know more about motorists than they do about public transport users. I think there's far more control and monitoring with cars than with public transport. And yes, it's true that some people may declare others as dangerous, and that is a problem. But I think what is more important is to work for social cohesion rather than being afraid of public transport. I certainly was pleased to see that during COVID, when unvaccinated people were banned from many spaces, public transport remained open to all. That is something we need to protect. And yes, we also need to work for better access to public transport for families. That will require change to the New Zealand way of thinking. In many other countries, large families can travel easily on public transport, but that's not the case in New Zealand. Still, it may well be that increased use of public transport in the future may affect what I hold dear. Therefore, I can only base my advocacy for public transport on my current experience. Having lived in Switzerland, I must say that the freedom that public transport provides when traveling cannot be matched by cars. That is particularly the case with public transport passes, where you can get on and off as you feel like it, explore this area or that, change plans, enjoy a quiet ride on a ship or a cable car. It's all possible. And it's all very comfortable and reliable. I think that is freedom. And as somebody who likes to hike, it's great that one-way trips are so easy with public transport. You can jump off the train, then walk several hours in the mountains, walk across a pass maybe, and then catch the train home from a totally different valley. In New Zealand, it's so much harder to go out and enjoy the countryside because you have to drive everywhere. And I don't like driving long distances. In addition, it's quite hard to get your children somewhere because traveling by public transport is restricted for those children. What I would give to send my children by public transport more often, and then I wouldn't have to drive them. Cities and settlements that are less car dependent are also so much more pleasant to be in and clearly less destructive to the environment. So yes, I may be wrong, but my life experience so far tells me that somewhere with good public transport, and especially good railways, is better for the people who live there and visit there, and certainly something that I value. It may be similar with faith. Clearly, I value it so much that I've decided to become a Christian minister, and that hopefully involves strengthening the faith of others and inviting people to get to know Christ. But of course, I may be wrong. People hold all sorts of strange beliefs. In fact, I am continually amazed by the ability of people to hold the weirdest and strangest of ideas. Now, there are many who argue that Christianity is all about social control, that the church is the embodiment of harmful patriarchy, that you have to leave your brain at the door before entering a church. Well, clearly not everything in the church is good. But overall, you can at least make the argument that the church, with its emphasis on lifting up the weak, with its focus on the crucified Savior instead of a divine King, that the church has made the world a better place. Also, much of the criticism of Christianity today comes from a perspective that is only possible because of the way Christianity has revolutionized our thinking. Now, of course, all that is debatable, but it's out there. For me, of course, it's more personal. I think that rather than social control, my faith has allowed me to understand and appreciate the world more fully. And one thing I can honestly say, at least, is that my thoughts and opinions are certainly not standard and conventional. Even more so, I have discovered theology, and despite what people might say, I think theology is beautiful and deep. Yes, at times it can be hair-splitting and actually downright ugly, but if we immerse ourselves in thinking and talking about God, it can be very rewarding. Also, in church, we can talk about things like in few other places, particularly if you consider how diverse the people are that go there. And then, of course, through it, I have also experienced God. Christian faith can never just be about making the world better, but it also must be about bringing people to experience God. Well, some may say that all that may just be some mind trick, but it is what has given me purpose and allows me to make sense of the world. My Christian faith has allowed me to experience goodness, beauty, and truth.